All right, in this episode, you're going to hear me and two other people talk about the podcast documentary. And the second part, you will hear the Podcumentary.
For me, I needed a space, and I didn't realize how badly I needed a place to re-engage with the faith. And that's what this gave me. It was a really big deal. And I didn't realize how much I needed it until I was able to kind of talk through some things with everybody there. And it has made such a difference in my outlook on life, just because I was not in the best place anyway. And I think I needed this to survive this pandemic.
So this is Matt Oxley, who's an integral part of the community and operations side of Bear With. He grew up in similar religious circles as I did, experienced some of the good, but now let's just say we're both very happy not to be entangled. I'm going to give a little shout out to Galatians 5:1 on that. He also identifies as queer and is an atheist. Was that in the middle of the pandemic?
We were starting to see waves, or it was starting to really show up around here. So I found it very helpful, and I still do. I like the fact that not a day goes by without someone saying something in one of the chats that either makes me laugh or makes me think or challenges me. Right. If I don't get one of those every day, I get all three. That's something I'm thankful for. I feel very close to these people I've never met.
That is really cool. And then you have some people who are like, please chat, be quiet, I'm muting you, but I can't wait to see everybody next week.
I like that that's an option. Nobody's begging anybody to interact if they don't want to. It's just kind of I guess I consider it like a buffet. You take as much as you want, you leave what you don't. That's kind of how I'm treating it. You know me, I've obviously been taking as much as I can from it because I needed this. It's been so hard for me to find a place that I can just discuss this faith without it turning into an angry debate or calling me a heretic or some other accusation. So it's nice to be able to have a place to do that in a civil way and in a way where I can tell everybody respect, at the very least, my views. Even if it's the furthest out there view that's being spoken about, I get the opportunity to talk about it and explain it. When people challenge me, it's fine.
Yeah, and what I love, you have a very, very minimal snapshot right now of Matt, and you know what he's bringing to the table. Here I am, still a professing Christian, still a pastor at a church that I have found family at, I call home. There's some people there that I do, but I don't regularly get to engage with a collection of these type of people and have the conversations that we have with each other. Kelly, I'm curious. People in the South don't see me as a redneck. Most of my listeners do. I don't think you can totally get the redneck out of someone who is in a redneck family. You may have debunked that theory, though. You may have gotten completely rid of redneck heritage in your heart. I'm curious.
I never claimed it, to be honest.
This is my cousin Kelly. We were raised very similarly, and I'm still a Christian, Kelly. Good Lord. I'm not complete rogue. We talk spiritual stuff sometimes, but usually when we all get together as families, we want to talk about other things and pick on each other's kids. I don't know, and frankly, don't care how much my cousin listens to my podcast. She's my cousin. I just want to hang out. Are you surprised at how far I've veered from evangelicalism, where you and I both were brought up in?
No, what I find interesting, you and Jared have always kind of been like the black sheep of the family in existing.
Not in a mean way.
Not in a mean way.
There goes Joey and Jared, the weirdos that we love. Come give us a hug.
There is a Craven family spectrum. You and Jared are on one end. And then I'm a little further in. What I think is funny is you've gone completely rogue religious wise. And that's not a bad thing. Again, it's on a spectrum, and you found your own way, and you've learned a lot of things through talking with people. And I think that's one thing where a lot of our family kind of misses, is that they're not always necessarily involved with groups outside of their train of thought.
All right, behind the scenes, I've been talking about a community that I've been involved in, been meeting together with a group of people in some way, shape, or form for the last few years. Some of us have been really connected as a group of extended family, attempting to live these sorts of convictions that we hold dearly on the show. We're basically trying to live it out in day-to-day life. This community is now open to all. We kind of wanted to establish some things, figure out what we wanted to do, but from here on out, this community is merged with what used to be called Pastor with No Answers patrons. Now it's It's the Bear With community. And we've made all second steps very simple. Even if you just want to snoop around, don't worry about that right now. We've made it simple in the show notes. Let me put it this way. If you're in the middle of deconstruction, and if you're in the middle of it, you know what I'm talking about. Unless your family is like really toxic on the other side of this thing, I love not only being a part of my family, but also the spiritual roots of my family. I don't feel I necessarily still jive with, but some of it I do. And some of it, even though I don't, I still like simple healing stuff that I wish was true. I like to be around that mentality. Being on the other side of the fear and disentanglement, it's not threatening anymore. It's not a trigger. It's something that reminds me of home. It's really weird. All right, now tuck all of this Bear With community stuff away, because this Podcumentary is about a 4-week community experience that led to what now we call the Bear With community. While the Bear With community is more like a church, sorority, or an active Facebook group, in that it is something that is functioning at all times and is open to all, the groups in this Podcumentary met for 5 weeks. There's a conversationally centered curriculum, a plan, shall I say, that has a beginning and end. These groups have been offered once. They're being offered again. Now, a 4-week experience in which you make new friends, talk stuff out, knowing that context is freedom to do so with no judgment, because we're all walking stories. A story isn't wrong. It's just a story.
I became a senior pastor right about the same time that I found out our previous senior pastor had been having multiple affairs with staff members. And meanwhile, he left ordained ministry because he said he could no longer stay in ministry because our denomination was allowing same-sex marriage. So in good conscience, he was like, I can't be a part of this denomination anymore. And everyone was like, good for you. You're taking a stand. And then within like 6 months, it came out that he had been having ongoing multiple affairs.
One time, 2 young men told me I needed to probably stop bringing up challenging topics, and I needed to just give people space to talk, whatever it is that they wanted to talk, and stop asking all these questions. And so by not having a good support system of people who are going through all of this, I really felt like the amount of chatter in my head questioning whether I'm sinning, whether I'm doing the will of God, was just so overpowering. And I think it was it really was taking a toll in my mental health. And I just really needed to take a breath.
If all we have is a childhood understanding of Scripture, then there's no wonder when we become mature adults, we look at Scripture and we look at our relationship with God, and we feel like we've aged out.
When you have those conversations within the church community, there is a fear that you're going to go outside, somewhere beyond God's reach. They kind of want to pull you back into exactly how they believe. There's not a whole lot of room for interpretation, free thinking, and questioning. There's not a lot of room for that. It's more like we have the answers for you. You just need to learn them.
The majority of people have questions or are processing stuff, but they're like me. They're afraid to bring it up because they might be the odd one out, or they fear people are going to think they're, losing their faith or something's going wrong.
So Joey, tell me, what made you want to start these groups? I think it's because there's just so many people, they haven't stopped believing. They just don't buy into the same ways of believing that they were always taught is the only way. The people around them, the Christians around them, they say, hey, you're on a slippery slope. But those people, you and I both know you can't go back. It's not like you can undo those questions. So, personally, I've changed so much in my faith, and I wouldn't have survived if it wasn't for other people who process similar questions, people at my church, Seacoast, friends that I've met podcasting. And not everybody has what I had to not feel alone. So, there's people that feel alone, and here we have technology. There's a way to connect people, kind of like a dating app. There's more fish in the sea now through technology, people for single people. So it's like, there's so many people out there that feel alone, and with technology, it doesn't really have to be that way.
Yeah, you're right. It really doesn't. And so you said you had people along your journey. Did that play into your, how did that evolve from saying, gosh, I want to be a part of this to something I want to offer this to other people? What about you makes it feel so unique that this is something that you get to be able to offer people? Yeah.
I've literally been obsessed with community, honestly, for a long time. Through the years, I've been a part of good community with small groups connected to mega churches. My wife and I started a house church. I've seen some pretty cool community as an extension of a podcast that I've been a part of. It's interesting. The people that are closest to me, my friend said before that when he's in a community gathering, small group gathering or something like that, he can just take a deep breath and be like, cool, Joey's here. Everything's going to be fine. And my wife teases me because she's just like, how can you be so awkward in a way that makes people feel so comfortable? So it's just, it's something that I really feel is a need for all humans. And it seems to be something that is just kind of in my wheelhouse, I guess, because I'm so interested in it. I think it's so important.
I felt that same way. I especially loved when we were going through the groups that you had already been there, if that makes sense. It was territory that you had already charted. And so that felt very safe while we were going through it. And so I love that. But, I also have been a part of a house church and bigger church, like you said, but I have had difficulties finding community with people who have wanted to talk about the same issues that I want to talk about. And even just being open to talking about it. But in your experience, why do you think that is? Why is it so hard to find community of people who are willing to sort of wrestle with these bigger questions?
It just kind of depends on the scenario. I think for some situations, and I've made this mistake as well, it's like community is something that will sometimes come natural, like your family, for instance. I'm part of a community of 6, 4 kids, 2 parents, and whether it's good community or bad community, we're in community together, and that's just a natural part of our lives. But when you look for something, I guess, more specific, it's so easy to be so intentional and so mechanical that you just ruin it, because it's like it's not something that you can necessarily coerce. And at the same time, anything requires intentionality. So there really is a weird balance that I don't think none of us can ever slap a formula on it and figure out exactly how to do it. But it's tricky. But I think in a lot of churches, honestly, the focus is on the wrong thing. It's like, there's times I just want to take a deep breath and just say, can we please forget everything and just seek God together? But instead, there's a lot of fear that comes from systematic theology that's, it's kind of like you're in, you're out. And if you don't believe this way, you're kind of a threat to everybody. And I'm like, God is so big. He created the universe, and we get stuck on whether or not this or that is acceptable on like a Sunday morning, for instance. And I even feel like they tried to pin Jesus down. Like, what's the whole point of living? And it's simple. It's like, well, love yourself, love others, love God. And seems like it could be way more simple, just a bunch of people seeking God together. But we complicate things.
Yeah, we absolutely do. And to be honest, when I first heard of it, I kind of was nervous about doing it because of my experiences in other communities. So for a life group, I've always hated those, like the connect groups, because it was basically just questions around sort of a sermon. There wasn't a chance to explore these other things. So can you kind of speak to how this is different in terms of topic or content that we go through in these groups that's different than somebody who's been in a small group situation and maybe didn't feel safe or didn't enjoy their experience there?
I feel like there's a precedent set at the beginning that everyone can and should feel completely safe to be exactly who they are. No one expects people to be at a certain place in their journey or at a certain place in their faith. And so right there from the get-go, people are just completely free to be who they are. It's almost like when it comes to community, these groups, it's almost like we're cheating because we find people that are in the same situation as us as far as having doubts and having questions. And, you know, for some people, it's a very scary, lonely time. For other people, it's just like, yeah, I just want to talk to other people that are thinking through the same things. But you get a bunch of people like that together, and there's just so much to relate to. And I mean, it literally is like cool water on a summer's day, honestly,
right?
When you hear someone else articulating the same sort of thoughts and questions that you have as well. And so you went through these, you were in these groups. And so there was definitely some intentionality, basically taking some of the thoughts and things that have kind of been in my mind and some of the thought processes that I've walked through that I think are helpful. But the main ingredient with these is hearing everybody else and just what they are contributing to the conversation, because there's just freedom in being around other people who are going through the same sort of thing.
I do also think you did such a good job in the content and how you set it up. And when we ask questions or discuss topics, there was no right answer. You know, it was just hearing, like you said, where everyone else was. And that makes it possible, I think, for much more, not only freedom, but safety for people to just sort of be who they want to be.
And to the point, and I don't know if you remember this, but to the point where there were a couple of times or a few times where I wanted to close in prayer, and I literally wanted to make sure that if anyone was not comfortable in their current season of faith to pray with other people, hey, we're about to pray, so peace out if this is uncomfortable for you. Like there's no expectations. We're a bunch of people.
Yeah, like no coercion,
right.
No expectations. Yeah, total permission and freedom.
My favorite thing with the groups and the whole vibe was just being with like-minded people who I know are in the same situation. They're like, hey, I've been processing this for a long time, but I have no one to talk to without fear of judgment or repercussions at work or anything like that. And it was nice to know that the people I was talking to, that they had almost the exact same situation where they didn't have anyone to just openly talk about what's going on in their life.
If I had something to share, I would absolutely be able to, but I wasn't dependent on to have an opinion about everything. I could just listen and learn from other people who are thinking similar thoughts. Like we don't scare each other. We are open to hearing these different places on the journey and different concerns that each one of us has with like where we're placed and how free we can speak. Like to have a community of people that we can all say, these are the thoughts we want to verbalize, but we don't have a place where we can say them out loud without literally fear of repercussions, like in a fundamental tradition or evangelical tradition. You're not really allowed to walk along this journey and grow into your faith.
I think it's really important because a lot of folks don't have the space to have these kind of conversations locally. They're super intimidated, fearful even to have these discussions with people, even family members or people in their church they've known for a long, long time, out of fear of being ostracized, fear of being judgment. And this is a place, my experience with my group, there was zero judgment at all. Even when people disagreed, there was not a sense of, well, man, this guy's going to hell, or that girl has no idea what she's talking about. There was this incredible openness. And I loved that. It created this cross-pollination that I thought was really, really healthy.
It's helped us begin to say things out loud that maybe we don't feel like we can say in our own personal communities. And I think this might be a way to kind of get us to bolster our courage and our strength so that maybe we can have those same conversations with the people that we live with as well.
Going into it, as you are reconstructing your faith or figuring out what you actually believe and taking away from the way you grew up, it's like you have more and more questions, and I think that you get to realize how much more like it's okay to be uncertain.
I think my favorite part was finding people who are much further along in their journey than I am. Because I remember I joined the group because I felt like I was drowning and I wanted to just catch my breath. And this felt like the right place where I could do that. And I think by seeing other people who've gone through who are having the same questions, who've already walked through that path a little bit more, it was really comforting to just know like it's going to be okay. Just finding a group of people that I could resonate with.
Everybody came to the group feeling comfortable with, look, there's not going to be a wrong here. And I think that allowed me to have that safety.
This community really helped me get honest with people in the congregation about stuff like that and to be able to talk about stuff in an open and transparent way. I think this is a really unique opportunity that we have in the church moving forward, because this can be a place where we can demonstrate what really loving one another looks like, even in spite of the differences that we have.
As a person of color who moves in very white spaces, sometimes I feel like I'm not 100% myself. And the only place where I feel like people kind of get me a little more is my very, very conservative traditional church, where their theology doesn't always resonate with me. And in fact, I have many issues with it.
I love that. And I do want to say too, what we talked about, like the digital space, going back to technology, and tell me if this was intentional or maybe it was just a awesome bonus byproduct from it. I actually ended up feeling, I was uncertain of how I would feel sharing information with people on a screen. You know what I mean? Like, is this going to feel natural? I actually felt safer and more freedom to be myself, because it was like having a bunch of third-party voices speak in that weren't necessarily emotionally attached to me, and I felt like could give me permission or give me advice or give me freedom, and then I could continually live that out then throughout the week in my life. I actually was so surprised by that. And so what was your experience there? And did you feel like, because maybe with your background, with your podcast and different groups you've been a part of, have you found that to be true? That in some of these areas, because I think social media, we often think we're really connected to people, but we're not actually being personal. But this actually gave the opposite experience for me. I felt very connected to these people that I've never met in actual person. So was that intentional, or do you feel like that was just a great byproduct of how these things are working out?
I mean, honestly, I just think we're entering an age where digital is seen as, more and more people are seeing it as pretty much the equivalent of just day-to-day relationships. Yeah. And people that still have that disconnection, I mean, I would gently encourage to try to dissolve that in your head, because it's just our way of life now. Personally, I never once thought, man, this isn't face-to-face, so it may not work out. And maybe that does have to do with just all the podcasting that I've done in the past. Right.
Well, I loved it. I thought it was really good. And it was, like you said, a breath of fresh air for sure. And so why do you feel like community was so quickly formed among these different people? Do you feel like it was the permission, or like you said, the freedom that we all had, knowing we've either all going through it or been through it? But what do you feel like was kind of the secret sauce that made it such good community form so quickly?
I think it goes back to everybody knew what they were getting into and why they were getting into it, because obviously with my invite and the fact that people paid to be a part of these groups, they obviously knew what they were getting into. And so it's a little bit different than, hey, I'm going to join a women's small group, and you don't really know what to expect, what they're talking about, what the format is. But with something like this, I think it was easy for people because everybody knew, they didn't know exactly what was going to happen. And they knew, hey, we're going into this because we need community with other people who are asking similar questions. I mean, quite frankly, it's scary to be alone, especially when you find yourself with no one else to talk to. I mean, there's tons of Christians, if they talk to their circle of friends in the church about some of the questions they have, they're going to be encouraged to make an appointment to the next altar call to get Satan prayed out of them, you know? And so it's not funny, and I actually do think that, you know, I'm going a little overboard, but I do think that represents some of the people's background in our group. Right. And so just going into an environment where people have already asked the same questions, it's just bound to blossom. That's my opinion. You know, I really do think that you're just opening the door for community to form.
I totally agree. And given that, like we have, so like you said, there's such a diversity of people in the groups. And like you just referenced in our group, for sure, there was a lot of people who are on sort of the beginning of their journey. Some people who were like, no, I've been through this journey forever. But it's such a representation of how quickly the spiritual climate around us really is changing. Yeah. And so how do you see these groups really being a part of that spiritual climate that's changing so fast?
I definitely like the reflection of change. I mean, it's something I've been throwing out there for a while is you have Lifeway and Family Christian stores. They're all shut down, but the authors that those stores would not carry their books anymore are flourishing. So obviously Christians are sending a message of, hey, we're looking for something new. Like, it's not out with the old, in with the new. It's, we need more. We need to understand more. There's questions that people aren't answering because they're afraid to, or people aren't answering because they think it's bad. And I think when you look at Jesus closely and how welcoming he was to, you start to get sick of the polarity that you see on social media with ex-evangelicals and evangelicals, post-Christians, too conservative, not progressive enough. And we're all freaking out trying to draw the lines. Why not? Let's just all take care of each other. Maybe we're just all people. We're all changing. We don't know exactly what's going on. We don't know exactly what to do. Some of us feel compelled to leave church. Some of us feel compelled to stay. I do know this. I mean, we all really do need some like-minded community, you know, and there's a time and place for unlike community and learning from other people that don't think like you and being stretched. But you got to have people around you that when you talk, it doesn't sound like you are speaking a foreign language. So
I felt more compelled weekly to go to our groups than I did go to church. And because it felt more authentic of like, these are things we're actually wrestling with. But also what you said with this climate that's changing so much is it's almost like we just need people need a new construct, right? Like we don't have a space to discuss these things and still be Christian or still be wandering or whatever it is. Like there's so many labels and polarizing things. So this really hits that on the head and gives people space. And I love that. And the other thing I love that I experienced, I just thought this was so unique, was, you know, during the time that we met, our group was when Rachel Held Evans passed. It was neat for me to be able to come to a group and within light of everything we were already discussing, bring in something that was happening in the world. Yeah. You know, we don't see that a lot in church. There might be a quick mention of it, and then we just sort of move on, and it creates this bigger polarization of like scripture and what we're supposed to do with it and our beliefs and the things we're wrestling with on the day to day. So it was neat to then take all the stuff we were talking about it and put it in the context of real time with something that was going on. So I loved that.
And that's possible because our only goal is to come together, seek together, be there for one another. There's nothing else to it. Yeah. I mean, obviously you need a computer. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe some headphones, but other than that, it's like you're not thinking about how hundreds of people are going to take in a certain amount of information. It's just people together talking. I mean, how crazy of a notion that in itself is a super strong thing.
Yeah. So tell me your experience. I know there were people in our groups who were in leadership positions in ministry, and I know you're a pastor too. I felt like there was such a good mix of people who were maybe what we would call congregants, or, you know, people that aren't in ministry kind of on their journey. But also we had a handful of people that were in leadership that said, this is a safe place for me to be able to sort of work out my feelings or say something out loud and talk through something that I'm not necessarily able to yet with my team or my leadership team. So can you maybe speak to that, but also how healthy that is for leaders to have a space to do that? Because I don't think that they always do.
Yeah, so I joined one of these groups because I work at a pretty large megachurch, and I found it hard to be honest and authentic with the people I'm in community with, coworkers, friends, and it felt like no one would really want to voice their opinion out of fear of, you know, their job and the repercussions of just being honest where they are in their faith.
what made me love the group was the realization that there are just some things I can say as a Christian that I'm maybe not comfortable saying as a pastor.
I just wanted to learn how to talk about these thoughts I was having. I wanted practice with the conversation. You need some practice with expressing the thoughts you're thinking without doing damage, maybe alienating some people, perhaps even, honestly, losing your job or your leadership position or something. You know, if you don't have practice, then there's more danger of that.
I've been in ordained ministry for like 10 years, and I've always kind of struggled with this idea of how do you be honest? How do you convict people who are also the ones signing your checks? And this idea that, like, how do you move people to a new place? How do you challenge them? How do you, like, get really open and honest when at the same time, if they don't like what you've got to say, like, you can be gone.
It happened to be that everybody in my group was involved in the ministry. And from an impact, I'll say that I would chalk that hour I spent every week up as self-care. It just gave me an opportunity to be a follower and not to be the pastor, just to be able to speak freely and relax and just kind of give a deep breath.
I think the problem starts with the fact that people just want pastors to have all the answers and have them all fine-tuned. And honestly, we don't want to hear about your questions. We don't want to hear about your doubts because we're depending on you to give us what we need. And that is not a healthy culture. But for pastors that find themselves in that, first of all, I think they should probably try to change that culture and be as open and vulnerable as possible. You know, that's a tricky journey. And so I do think that a group like this, and I know this for a fact because some of the people that participate in these groups commented on just how great it was to have a place where they can completely be open and honest, because that was the intention of the group. You know, in my optimistic mind, I think that there's a lot of pastors that should probably stay put regardless of how their faith is changing, because as far as I'm concerned, we're all seeking after the same thing. So let's do it together. And potentially being in one of these groups can extend the season of someone pastoring a certain church, which could benefit the whole church and maybe even see some change through it.
Yeah. And at the very least, not feel lonely while they're going through it. That's huge. That is so huge. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, what if there's a pastor and he or she is basically thinking, man, I've got to take some slow steps to make a transition. And oh yeah, but right now I feel super, super alone.
Right. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
It's perfect.
You know, there's a place for them.
So tell me, how did you arrive at the name Bear Groups, and what does it mean?
Actually, Hayne, Griffin in one of these groups came up with the idea, and it's just like, may sound silly, but I immediately was like, that is awesome. And it comes from the terminology bearing with one another. There's a verse in the Bible, not sure which one it is. You probably know, you're translating the Bible.
I don't know.
bearing with one another. I mean, and so it just fit because in these groups, there's a lot of laughter, tears, and just people there for one another, and literally bearing with one another and being there for one another and sticking it out with one another. And then I do like the analogy when I think about, the whole mother bear thing.
Yeah, that's what I love.
You know, I'd love to take an aggressive approach to be like, enough is enough. Can we as Christians just take care of one another?
Right.
Like, let's not start with what we disagree with. Like, let's actually just care about each other's people. And let's not do that just for Christians. I mean, we're team humanity here. So just thinking of mother bear of your own. And when you think about that in the context of church, and just throw away all of the disagreements and, well, this person's this way, this person's that way, this person believes this way, and they can't be a Christian. Let's just take care of one another. And enough is enough. We hear you loud and clear. People want to draw a line and stay within their little crew. And I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be around people just for the sake of being around those individuals, understand understanding everybody is how they are because of their background, maybe personal mistakes, maybe mistakes that were done to them. I like the whole bear concept.
I do too. I love it. And I really felt the community was so strong that I really felt like you all had my back. So if I needed you to mama bear, I think you would have. And I appreciated that. I love that.
Yep. Here we spent, let's say, 5 or 6 hours together. And you mentioned this too. All my years of doing small groups, I've never seen such consistent participation.
Yeah.
And I've never heard such a consensus of how refreshing it was and just how quickly people gravitated towards each other. And who knows? Maybe we just had something special. Maybe that can never be replicated. But I tend to think that it's just a matter of different people coming together for a common goal without judgment, without preconceived notions of one another. I kind of think that's the recipe, if so to speak.
I agree. No, I agree. And I think there's something to be said about you, when you come into a space like this and knowing how vulnerable you are, you know that of each other. And so you automatically want to take care of each other, like you said. And so that's very unique. And I love that. Well, thank you so much, Joey. This has been awesome. And being a participant, I absolutely love these groups. I'll admit I was, just because of church history, unsure, and I'm so glad I did it. And I would highly recommend it. It was safe and it felt good. I grew a lot. I learned a lot, and I'm so grateful for them.
Awesome.
Damn, I just stopped by the grocery store for carrots and was walking to my car. I wish you would leave me alone.
Sorry.
But you say this is God's work, I would be helping you with.
Yes, it is God's work.
You want me to give them this info?
Yes.
The Bear With community will have a live access to a capitalism versus communism debate this coming Thursday, May 19th. Between two regulars, Jack Hoy, the older, and Matt Oxley. You couldn't get a bigger generation gap.
Good.
And from what I understand, Matt thinks capitalism is the devil's masterpiece. That's it.
Yes.
You're serious.
I'm serious.
Why couldn't you have just read the damn thing?
Because I really thought you did such an awesome job. Like, thank you.
You're welcome.
What's your name
Why,
again?
though? Did you like my voice?
Yes, I did.
When did you hear it?
I really, really liked your voice.
I'm serious. Tell me why.
I heard you talking to the lady at the register. I'm sorry. I really am sorry. Get the carrots home. I'm sorry, sir. I'm very sorry, sir.
Should I pursue jobs that have to do with me vocal cords?